Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 19 of Cowboy Bebop. If you would like to watch along, start watching now. So this episode is called Wild Horses, and based off of the preview from last time, there was something about like an old, I guess you'd call it a space shuttle. So it seems like that's going to be the crux of this week's episode. Spike appears to have crash landed on some barren desert moon somewhere, and Faye appears to be stranded out in the middle of space. So the crew of the Bebop is sort of staking out and waiting for pirates. It doesn't sound like they've had very much luck this far. So interestingly enough, it appears as though Jet isn't really aware of whatever Spike's predicament is, which is apparently him having crash landed and being unable to check in or visit. So it appears that Spike was expecting a ride, but the person that came to pick him up isn't who he was expecting. Though Spike is showing some clear irritation with Doohan's assistant here. He appears to be a baseball fanatic, and given what we know about Spike, it's unlikely that he would care about it at all. I feel like this kid would sort of fall under Spike's policy of not liking kids, women, and pets. So interestingly enough, the kid mentions that he's a Blue Sox fan, and to my knowledge, there is no such team that currently exists. So I guess that's the writers having a bit of fun with the mythology here. So while Spike and the assistant were sort of driving in, Doohan, the old man, was apparently trying to restore some ancient relic of a spaceship. And everybody seems, if not disdainful, just dismissive of him and his efforts. I guess it would be like somebody working really hard to restore an old automobile from like 1910 or something. So while that's all going on the surface of whatever planet Spike managed to crash on, it looks like the pirates have sort of latched on to Faye, thus springing the trap, so to speak. Now, interestingly enough, that little that little bit with Faye's ship looked like it looked like CG rather than the regular 2D animation the rest of Cowboy Bebop is. And I think all things considered, that was probably a pretty good use for CG. It didn't look especially out of place, especially given Cowboy Bebop is probably approaching, what, 20, 30 years old by this point? I thought it looked quite good, and if it wasn't so prominent in the shot, I don't think I would have pegged it as CG. So it seems the pirates have gotten the better of the crew of the Bebop, managing to, I guess, jam their systems by hacking, and they managed to make a fairly clean getaway, unfortunately for the crew. So we've got like a shot of a poster board here, and judging by all the pictures, it seems like Doohan in his younger days was a real sort of maverick pilot. And there's also a picture of him standing next to what appears to be a considerably newer and better maintained model of Spike's ship, which I believe is called the Swordfish. So, perhaps Spike bought the ship from this guy or otherwise acquired it. Who knows? So, Miles and Doohan appear to have a philosophical disagreement here in regards to fixing the machine the way it is or upgrading it to current standards. Miles is of the opinion that, some of this pneumatic tubing is old and out of date. Perhaps we should update it to current standards. Doohan says, no, that's not going to fly. Alright, so Spike manages to finally check in, but it's just with Faye. And it seems like really nobody on the Bebop except Jet and maybe Ed have a really concrete idea of exactly what happened to the ship. Turns out it's a computer virus of sorts that's affecting the navigation systems and things like that. But Faye, being, I guess, a layperson in terms of mechanics and things like that, doesn't really have a good grasp on it. Alright, so this is interesting. There's a guy who's delivering parts to Doohan, and while Spike's talking about the bounty, it seems like the two things might be related. So Jet seems to be dead set on revenge against these pirates. Spike doesn't really seem concerned about it, but Jet's sort of strong arming him with the invoice for the repairs to the swordfish. So it seems like the only way to really handle these pirates and their computer viruses is to take it really low tech. Sort of like bypassing a security door by blowing it off the hinges rather than picking the lock. Alright, so here we have another shot of CG of like a sort of, I guess a space colony of sorts. And that's considerably more clunky than the other shot of Faye's craft. Granted, I'm willing to let it slide considering the age of Cowboy Bebop, but, that's pretty noticeable. But I guess for stuff like that, that's probably the best use for CG. Personally, I'm not a fan of mixing mediums, 2D and 3D. It tends to look jarring. So it looks like both Jet and Faye are of the mind that you should shoot first and ask questions later. And that philosophy might have gotten them into trouble. You see, while they're pretty sure that they're after the pirates they think they're looking for, there are some non negligible odds that they might have just attacked, regular space truckers. So, Faye has come up empty handed in terms of pirates. They were, in fact, actual truckers. As for Spike, it's not yet clear. So it looks like Spike has guessed correctly. This is the first time he's really flying the swordfish after it got banged up, however it did. So far, he's acquitting himself rather nicely. It appears that Doohan is a miracle worker because the swordfish is handling rather nicely. So the hackers don't really seem aware of the gambit Spike was attempting to pull along with Jet. They claim that him cutting his mono system is like, oh, what an idiot. He's gonna get pulled into Earth's gravity well. But it seems like through some sort of unintended consequences, the pirates are in the same boat as Spike. Without the mono system, they're in dire straits. So both ships are being slowly pulled towards the Earth. And I'm no astrophysicist, but I would say neither of those ships are really rated for planetary reentry. It's a pretty violent thing, and the friction that air creates gets pretty darn hot. So while Spike drifts close to Earth, Doohan and Miles appear to be having another disagreement about this old hunk of junk, which I would assume refers to the the ancient space shuttle. So things are looking grim for Spike. He's going to be re-entering Earth's atmosphere, and he'll burn up. Due to some of the astrophysics involved, Jet would have to take a pretty roundabout path to intercept him. So Spike sort of tells Jet about some whiskey he's had stashed. The implication being that he's going to die, so he's not going to need it. And while that's going on, Doohan says, hey, I'll pick you up and give me your exact coordinates, and I'll give you a hand. And so out trots this ancient space shuttle. It has Columbia written on it, and I'm not exactly an expert on NASA and all their space missions, but I'm fairly certain Columbia's quite a few decades old. Whatever mission it was a part of. So Spike and Doohan have a sort of grudging respect for each other. And as it turns out, Doohan was actually the one that gave Spike the swordfish in the first place. So, tellingly, Doohan gives Miles the option of getting off the space shuttle before it launches. So, I guess that informs you about precisely what he thinks about his chances of using this old hunk of junk, especially in the way that they're launching it. So normally space shuttles like this would have, I guess, booster rockets in order to reach escape velocity. But they've sort of rigged this shuttle differently rather than using the giant booster rockets one would normally think of. Interesting, and frankly, I'm not sure how feasible it would be in real life, but it looks pretty cool to me. So Spike's angle of descent has sharpened, unfortunately. So the situation is becoming more and more dire. He's basically got to land inside, I guess, the bay of the space shuttle, and if he can do that, everything should be more or less good. So Spike manages it, but now there's a secondary complication. The shuttle needs to get back to Earth, but they've already lost most of the heat resistant tiles. So there's a better than decent chance that they actually will burn up on reentry. I seem to recall there was one space disaster because some of the ceramic tiles had peeled off, interestingly enough. So we don't really get to see the climax of their reentry to Earth, but based off of that little picture on the clipboard at the end, it's safe to assume that they made it. So, next episode, we don't have, I guess, a narration. Rather, we just have some insane laughter and visuals of a fight between Spike and a man dressed in a suit. So, to my mind, that's one of the more disturbing episodes, but that's neither here nor there. That's all for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one.